Hi everyone and welcome to the MYOB Greentree update for October 2019. As usual, a brief agenda. So I'm going to be talking about the 2019.5.0 release, an overview of what's in that release, and the usual feedback and questions. Okay, so for the 2019.5 release, this was released on the 23rd of September and is available on FTP. So this video is going out a bit later. Apologies for that. Release notes are done and available. These are available on campus and in the Salesforce knowledge base. Just go into the knowledge base and search for release notes. So the highlights of what's in the release. Usual caveat is look at the release notes to get the detail, but here's the highlights. eDocs. We're going to be talking about field conversion rules. It's a bit of a mouthful. And limiting the activity codes. So some enhancements there. Browser. Adding sales request. Sorry, I'll get my words right. Browser. Adding service request only on timesheet entry. There's some fixes across the Windows client, some fixes on the browser. Team and user inquiry form, brief demo of that. And some things from the ideas portal. Okay, let's get into it. So on eDocs and the field conversion rules. Okay, so what this is this is the ability to map fields in eDocs or set conversion rules. I'm sure all at one point in DIM we've used the mapping there, so not too dissimilar. So this is at a supplier level and within the setup tab within the eDocs tab, as highlighted on a screenshot there. So like with all these things, the best thing to show you is a brief example of what we're talking about here. So here's a couple of examples that I've pulled in. So within that field conversion rules at the supplier level, so this is supplier by supplier, I've got the field name and I'm doing the kind of find and replace if you like. So for the invoice number, you'll see I want to take out, keeps reading it as H0, I want it to be HO. PO number, it keeps reading it, I should say, as O's, I want it to be leading zeros. So the list you could have multiple fields there, as I've shown on this individual supplier here. So in the second screenshot below there, what I've done is I've used that, as you'll see, there's a test button. So in the test conversion, it doesn't actually go off and do the scraping for me. What it's doing, it's recognizing what that is, and it's giving you by reading across there's my invoice number. You hit the test and it goes, this is what I'm going to be doing. So there's a little test to make sure that what you've done is what the system is trying to recognize. So at this point, I want to talk about an important note on these eDocs field conversions. If, I stress the word if you're going to be using this functionality, there's a change in the method used and you should check your ANA rules. While there's an ANA rule that comes out as part of the demo system and you may be using that, we appreciate that everybody might have slightly different ANA rules that are going on. In general, not, but the caveat here is that you need to check these. Currently, the ANA rule uses a method called getFieldValue. If you look in that script, you'll see that method being used to look up the supplier. This has changed. So if you're not using field conversion rules, or you're not sure, then you don't need to bother. If you are going to use them because you've got this issue on a couple of suppliers, then you will need to change your method in the ANA rule. It's all a bit of a mouthful. So with field conversion, this now uses a method called getFieldValueConverted. Just going to have a little pause there while you take that in. So again, to reiterate, if you are going to use the field conversion, then you need to check your ANA rules for AP invoices, potentially credit notes as well. And if it requires changing, then test it before putting it in live. So I guess what I should have put there in bold is, you have been warned. So please take the time to check it and test it before you put it into live. Okay, continuing on with eDocs, there's a new tab been added on the requisition type. And this is in brackets only for eDocs. If you haven't got eDocs, you won't even see this tab. Okay, so it's to do with job costing, and within the job cost on the requisition type, you'll see there with that tab, so what you're now doing, what you have now got is the ability to limit it. So what does this mean? Or control it, I should say, limit control. So this assists in limiting the JC activities presented to the user, which prevents miscoding, speeds up the data entry and collection, and also helps in loading the screen faster. So if you like, excuse me, for example, I've got a before scenario there. So there's a screenshot taken from the eDocs entry screen. On the requisition types tab, I've called up my requisition type, I've clicked the reload, and I've got a list of jobs and activities there that I can potentially select from my invoice that's been scraped. And you'll notice that in my activities, I've got a list here. Again, this is the demo systems. I've got a fairly simple list of accommodation and general purchases, or the ACC activity code, or the PERCH activity code. I'm sure in the demo system, we're all used to seeing those ones. So then what I've done, here's my after screenshot, if you like. I've moved the activity PERCH out of that activity group. So now when I reload the screen, I'm now limited just to those activity codes for the ACC, or the accommodation as it's set up. So therefore that screen would load faster, and I can control what the users would see, speeding it up, helping to eliminate miscoding, and therefore controlling what job codes people can use. So hopefully you'll see the benefit of that in some of the sites you've got. And I've put a note in there as well on upgrading. So when you move to 2019.5 with eDocs, because this functionality is there, the all activity groups is set to true. So you don't have to suddenly panic and go, nothing's switched on, and you have to go and set this all up. So when you upgrade to this, everything is selected, so you don't even need to worry about it if it's not an issue. But there it is if you need to consider it for use, or you believe it might be a benefit to use to speed things up. Okay, moving on. Team and user inquiry. So there's the menu path where this exists. So system setup, teams and user inquiry. So I want to emphasize the point there, this is a read only. So don't go thinking that we can suddenly start ticking changes here. This is read only to give a better view of team and user access across companies, and to potentially, well, you can do it, export the results out of Greentree. I think a lot of us have been in the scenario where auditors want a report, or management want a report to review what user access is like. So now we've got the ability to do this. So I'm just going to, I think my next slide covers that. So let's take a look. I'm just going to bring up my demo system. This is fairly self-explanatory, and there has been some stuff on the discussion groups that developers have put up in the early stages looking for feedback, but I'll just take you through this. But you'll find it's fairly self-explanatory and to work your way through. So here's Greentree. Sorry, I didn't mean to surprise anybody with that. So just to go through it, so again, from that slide, so it's a system setup, team and user inquiry. There's that screen that I had on my PowerPoint. Just make that a little bit bigger. So I can search by teams. I can look by teams. So here I am. So first of all, let's go into admin first of all. Let's take the first one on the list. So admin applies across these companies. So it's almost a cascading effect to it. So here's the users. I've got it up here as well. Here's the users that are assigned to this team across which companies. And I'm getting the summary up here as well as what's going on. And here's the users here. Now just bear in mind again, as I said, this is read only. So I can tick to my heart's content. It's not going to do anything. Now you'll notice there I drilled down. I didn't mean to do that. Let's go back to teams. I can look across suites. So again, I'm looking across what suites this team has. So I can see there, looking at it. Okay, landscape and portrait. So this is just to do as to how you might want to export it or how you might want to view it as well. Menus, here we go again. So this is under this team. So I can start to limit by companies if I want to look at that. I can also search if I want to as well. Searching through the list, especially when you get to menus here, that can be quite an extensive list as the scroll bar will show you. Okay, so the same applies to users. I can then look at the users. I want to jump back here. I'll start from this effect. So as you can see, there is a bit of a waterfall effect to this. So I'm looking at Cameron Cook, for example, or our old favorite, Craig Clark. What companies does Craig have access to? What teams is he a member of? And again, all the time, it's giving me the display up here of what these are. Suites. What does Craig have access to? What menus does Craig has access to across what companies? Again, this is where, at this point, the auditors might say, what's this? I need to review it. Right-click, and as per usual Clever Tables, I can export that out. How it does, and explains this in the release notes as well. I'm not going to do it here. Don't want this video to go on for too long. It sets a true and false. So if I export that out, it'll say true where it's selected and false where it's not. Going down further the list, companies, but as you can see, this becomes fairly self-evident as you go down. Companies, what teams are in that companies, what users have assigned, and what modules are in use. That one's pretty useful there, I'm sure you'll realize as well. Looking across companies, what modules have I got in use there? And again, I can export that out. Menus, again, takes the other view around again. So keep flipping this on its head. Here's the teams, but I want to go users. Okay, so data entry, who's got that? But now I want to come down to supplier maintenance. Who's got access to the supplier maintenance? If I don't want to look at all companies, I've just been asked to do, oops, and there we go. And there we go, we can limit it down. Makes it a bit less cluttered on there. Suites. Again, we can look across suites. Who's got access to what? Let's go into something a bit more job costing. That's what I might be looking at. What teams have now access to job costing and what users has access to this. And all the time we've got the search function on here. As it's a demo, I haven't got much data to look at, but here we go, it's Craig. Or even Steve, and there it goes. I think you get the idea. So this team and user inquiry, introduced at 2019.5, really useful for giving you quick access to who's got what. We've all been in that scenario, and also to be able to export it out to satisfy or meet any requirements of somebody who's looking at that. And I'm just going to jump back to my PowerPoint, 2 seconds there. Okay, so I've there's some more details. It covers that in the release notes, but some more details, just a brief look anyway, I should say, at that team and user security form. Okay, something else that I'm going to have to jump back into Greentree to show you here. So PDF attachments are now able to be displayed on the workflow desk. So might be stopping and thinking, okay, so what does that give me? Let me give you a couple of random examples, or a couple of examples I've set up. A little bit of a setup. You just need to add that PDF type into your attachment type. Screenshot in the release notes. So back into Greentree here. So I'm just going to pick on a couple of workflow desks that some of you may be familiar with in the demo system, and it's better to take that approach and show you something kind of where it exists already. So first of all, I'm going to do the old favorite, the 3D CRM. I've created a new one, just amended it slightly. We'll see what this does in a second. So you may or may not be familiar with this one. This is the CRM desk. This is always a good demo one to demonstrate how 3D works. So I've got this. So now what I've done, you'll notice I've changed this panel from what it normally looked like. So I've got an attachment, in this example, I've got an attachment against a quote. So this attachment is a PDF document, but the PDF could be anything. And I've been slightly up front here, but I've been a bit lazy. I've just got an attachment that I thought was fairly generic. But because the quote could be made up of several documents, that's not a problem. We can have multi-page documents and it will let you scroll through that. But this quote here, I've just got the PO. So the PO was some information that might make up this quote. So if I click on this now, you'll see that that PDF, and I've just done my 3D effect and I've pulled in the organization name and the quote number as the heading on there. So if it was a multi-page, it would just go through, but that's an example of how the PDF can be displayed on the workflow desk. We've always had images before. So let's show you another example. So that's a fairly simple one. Show you another example. Take it to the next extreme. I created a eDocs desk. And I'll wait for it to load my eDocs desk. Here it comes. Okay, so again, I've taken the kind of standard eDocs desk. As you can see, I've modified it slightly, and what I've done, I've just put that 3D Live panel in the middle there. So again, like all good demonstrations, here's one I used earlier. So all I've done in this, again, I've created that 3D desk. So what you could do, I'm just going to choose this one. So here's that invoice that applies against that eDoc transaction there. So I haven't done anything with this. It's a status of ready to be coding. Oops, don't want to do that. Oh, doesn't matter. But there's the PDF. Obviously, I could make it bigger, and all I've done is put the eDoc reference there. It's transaction number 196. But as you'll see, as I go through here, I could bring those PDFs in or display the PDFs without actually going into the transaction. Sorry, it's been a bit slow to refresh there. It does actually work. So you'll see what's happening there. I'm going to do that one. So again, it's not limited to transactions that may have been processed, or but we can't find these transactions. But there we go. You get the idea of what's going on in terms of displaying those PDF documents onto my workflow desk without having to go into the transaction. And of course, I could make that a lot larger for people to see. The release notes talks about a little bit of setup just in the attachment maintenance. But otherwise, it's actually a 3D desk, so no changes, no surprises there. Okay, back to here. Talks about PDF attachments. SR only transaction types on a mobile timesheet. So on my mobile employee maintenance, I now have a timesheet update flag there where it's highlighted down here of SR only. Okay, so what does that mean? So on my mobile timesheet, you'll see that I have entered some timesheet lines directly against service requests. Okay, so what's the effect? There's a couple of things to note here. So there's my service request. What it does, I'll just flick back here, sorry. I've entered the status, the hours to complete, and the complete percentage. So that means on the service request, my effort to complete and my percentage to complete are updated from that timesheet line with the SR only. And also, sorry to flick there, my status is updated. So depending what your statuses are and how you're using those service requests, that's on the additional tab, whereas this one here, sorry for jumping around, it's on the timeline tab. So a couple of things to note, which I did put on the bottom of this PowerPoint here. SR only lines do not put the timesheet lines on the service request. What it does do, this is covered in the release notes in detail as well, the hours to complete, the percentage complete, and the status. Now the status, as you know, is just on almost like the header. It doesn't apply to all the lines on the service request. So it's the last timesheet line updates the status. So whatever the last line that goes in there, that updates the status. Oh, I apologize with my slide here. I didn't do that very well. Browser inquiry licensing. So there's some changes there. I'm going to do that separately rather than go into the detail here in this. Please ignore that. I didn't copy my PowerPoint slide very well. So that's to be coming. I will be doing a separate documentation around that. Ideas portal. So if you go into the Ideas portal, you can filter by the left-hand side, by the release. And as you'll see there, that's what's been released. So those are the ideas that have been released from the Ideas portal into the 2019.5 release. And as you'll see, those show PDF attachments on desktop panels was part of that as well. Okay, fixes in the 2019.5 release. See the release notes for all the details, but these, so fixes are always attempted to be done across multiple modules. We don't want to fix on one module or one specific area. So there are some fixes for eDocs, payroll, accounts receivables, sales orders, various. So the ones that are under various are because mainly there's just one-off items in these areas. So fixed assets, inventory, EDI, workflow desk, job costing. You can all read those. Some browser and some web view. Okay, and lastly, feedback and questions. So again, I apologize for this video coming out slightly late after the release. Several reasons around that. But so feedback and questions, you know, standard routine, please feel free to email me and I will follow up on anything. There's already been a couple of stuff come in, which has slightly diverted me. But anyway, please feel free to email me and I'll go and look something up or get back to you. Otherwise, that's it from me. So thank you for your attention to make it to the end. And I hope this video has been useful. And just to recap that I will be putting something additional up just on those browser inquiry licenses in the next few days. Just a bit of documentation around that. Anyway, thanks for your time.